Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Han and I'm a professional hand embroidery artist. I do specialise in shoe embroidery, and today I thought I would bring you along as I embroider onto a pair of shoes for a client. In this box I have a pair of white monochrome high top Converse, and I'll be embroidering one of my popular floral designs onto it for a bride in Orlando, Florida. Jennifer, if you're watching, these are your shoes. Jennifer's colour scheme is very earthy. She's chosen forest green and rust as her main colours for this design, and she made a note that she basically just wants a very fall themed bridal shoe. She's also requested her wedding date to be put on the back of the shoe, so I'll be doing that once I've finished the main embroidery on the shoes. Today my plan is to just take you through my entire process of what I do when I'm embroidering shoes for clients. I'll show you some up close shots of the stitches and basically just show you how I go about embroidering my shoes. I actually also have a downloadable shoe embroidery PDF for this exact design, so I'll have that linked below if you watch this video and you're like, hey, I kind of want to do that to my own shoes. You absolutely can, so I will have that linked below, and let's just jump right into the video. So the first step in this process is just to unbox the shoes and get them prepared for embroidery. I like to check and make sure there's no marks or stains on the shoes, because obviously then I have to send them back and reorder the same pair. But thankfully there were no marks on these shoes, and I just wanted to show you the logo on the inside of the shoes. That's why these white monochrome Converse are so popular, I think. Then I go ahead and unlace the shoes. I do recommend, if you're new to this and trying it for the first time, just completely unlace the shoes, take the laces all the way out. The method that I use though is I unlace it all the way down to the very bottom eyelets. Then I take the tongue and just tuck it underneath the toe cap at the front of the shoe. This keeps it out of the way and makes sure that I won't embroider onto it by accident. I almost forgot to show you what I'll be listening to today as I embroider. I like to listen to audiobooks, and today I'm listening to Powerless by Lauren Roberts. These are the colours that I'm going to be going in with on these shoes. As I said before, the bride has requested a fall, earthy colour scheme. I like to store my thread on these clothes pegs, and then I write the DMC number. These are the needles that I always use when I'm embroidering onto shoes. Honestly, any embroidery needles will do. I just like to use these because I've had the best luck with them. I'll have these and all of the other supplies that I use in this video linked in the description below, just to make it easier for you to grab them yourself if you're trying a shoe embroidery project. If you are planning on trying out shoe embroidery, you are going to need finger protectors. The ones that I use are just silicone, and they make it easier for me to pull the needle through the fabric, and they also protect the skin on my fingertips. So I've gone ahead and I have threaded my needle here, ready to get stitching. I'll be using different numbers of strands throughout this project, and all of that information is listed in the shoe embroidery PDF that I have linked in the description. The first stitches I'm going to be doing are going to be for the larger flowers on the outsides of the shoes and also on the insides of the shoes. These stitches are lazy daisy stitches, but they're a lot larger than regular lazy daisy stitches that you might have seen before on smaller flowers. To stitch this big flower, I basically just go around in the shape of a semicircle, making sure all of the petals are a very similar size. I also don't sketch out anything on my shoes before I head in and embroider. This is just because I stitch from memory. I've been embroidering this design for the past 5 years, so it's all just kind of muscle memory at this point. However, within the PDFs that I sell, I do go into detail on how to sketch this design out with an erasable marker so that your finished product will end up just like the finished clips of these shoes that I embroidered. The key to a great lazy daisy stitch is to get the perfect amount of tension on the thread. As you can see, I just create a loose loop and then I go back in with an anchor stitch. You should never be putting too much tension on the lazy daisy stitch with the anchor stitch, because if you do, what it'll do is just suck those two stitches together very, very tightly, and that's not what you want. That's not going to create a petal shape. That's just going to create one line basically. So to create the nice domed petal effect, you need to have the perfect amount of tension on your thread. Once you're done with the one big flower on the outside of the shoe, you're going to do exactly the same process with the smaller flower that sits a little bit further down on the shoe. You should end up with something like this on the outside of the shoes when you're done, and then we're going to move on to the insides of the shoes. We're going to be doing 2 7-petal flowers on either side of the Converse logo. These are going to be a similar size to the smaller flower you did on the outside of the shoes. Again, making sure to keep the perfect tension on these stitches so that they turn out just like this. So once I'm done with all of the larger lazy daisy stitches on this one shoe, I'm going to move on to the next shoe and repeat the entire process on both the outsides and the insides of the other shoe. Now I'm going to go back in and stitch some smaller accent flowers. I'm using the same rust colour for these, and I'm also using the same stitch. I'm using the lazy daisy stitch, but this time they're going to be much smaller because I'm making small little accent flowers that are supposed to look like daisies. Another tip for stitching the lazy daisy stitch would be to not be afraid to go back in once you have anchored the stitch. Go back in with your needle just to fix the shape if you have to. So we have 2 of these smaller daisies on the outsides of the shoes, and then we also have 2 on the insides of the shoes. Here I'm just showing you how I tie off and secure the thread within the shoe once I'm done with a certain stitch. I usually loop the thread through some of the inner stitches a couple of times before double knotting it and then snipping off the excess. On the outside, one sits above the larger flower and then the other one sits between the larger flower and the smaller flower. And on the insides of the shoes, I stitch each flower to sit perfectly between the 2 larger flowers we did earlier. This is what I'm left with after I finished the smaller accent flowers on both the inside and the outside of both shoes. I'm going to be using this colour for both the pollen of the flowers that we've already stitched, and I'm also going to be using the same colour for the roses that I'm going to stitch between the smaller flowers and the larger flowers. To stitch the pollen on the inside of the flowers that we've already stitched, I'm going to be making some French knot stitches. Next, we're moving on to the roses, and we get to use the woven wheel stitch for the roses. I think it's called different things all over the internet, but I learned it as the woven wheel. Basically, we're going to stitch 5 spokes in a wheel, all meeting at the center, just using straight stitches for these and try and keep them the same size. Again, if you are using my PDF embroidery guide, all of this information will be listed there, as well as exact sizes for stitches and exact sizes of the sketches that you'll be following. Once you've stitched the 5 spokes, we're going to bring the needle back up through the shoe fabric, and we're going to start weaving the needle underneath the stitches that we just made. So let's number these stitches: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If you weave the needle under number 1, you're going to skip number 2 and then weave it under number 3, skip number 4, weave it under number 5, and just keep going in that fashion. So then you would skip number 1, weave it under number 2, skip number 3, weave it under number 4, and this is going to leave you with a really cool woven texture with the thread, and we're just going to keep going until you can't see those wheel spokes anymore. Here's a close-up of what I'm left with after I'm done with both sides of both shoes. Now I'm going to go in with a lighter sage colour. This bride did want forest green for her greenery, so by using the lighter sage for the smaller leaves, I'm kind of going for a bit of contrast here with the greenery. These smaller leaves, I just use a straight stitch and I make 5 leaves for each one of them, kind of angling the leaves and converging them to meet at one place. I'm going to be stitching 6 of these leaves onto the outsides of the shoes. And then I make 5 of these leaves as well on the insides of the shoes. Our vines are going to be growing from these leaves, so I just place them in kind of strategic spots. And then this is what I'm left with when I'm done with the smaller leaves on the insides and the outsides of both shoes. After I'm done with those smaller leaves, I'm going to go back in and add the vines that grow from those leaves. I'm going to be using the forest green that the bride requested for these. And again, we're going to be using more lazy daisy stitches, so remember what I said about the tension on the thread. I am using a slightly higher thread count for these than I did on the lazy daisy stitches for the flowers on this design, just because I want them to stand out a little bit more. I always do that on this specific design. So on the outsides of the shoes there are 5 of these vines, all of like varying lengths. And on the insides of the shoes I add 4 of these vines. This is what I'm left with after I finish all of the vines on both of the shoes. Now I'm going back in with the white thread that I showed you at the very beginning of this video, and I'm just adding some really small accents near the smaller leaves. I'm doing some French knots for these stitches, basically just to look like smaller flowers growing out of those leaves. And I add quite a few of those to the outsides of the shoes and to the insides of the shoes. The best tip I can give you for good French knots is to keep tension on the thread as you're pulling it through the shoe. So now that I've finished stitching all of the details and the design on the insides and outsides of both of the shoes, I'm going to go in and add the wedding date that this bride requested to have on these shoes. I'm going in with a slightly darker rust colour, and I'm just using straight stitches to stitch all of the numbers on the backs of these shoes. I actually love adding small little finishing touches like this. It just makes the shoes so personal. Something that's highly requested all the time on all of my videos is that I show the insides of the shoes. So here's a quick clip of that. As you can see, the stitches are really neat and tidy on the insides. There's no loose threads hanging anywhere, no huge lumps of thread that you would feel if you were wearing the shoes. Now all that's left is to lace up the shoes and get them ready to take photos. I always love how this design turns out, especially when I'm able to do a full themed colour scheme. I'm really loving the dark green of the vines and the rust coloured larger flowers. And I can't wait to send some pictures of these to the bride for her to approve them to be shipped out. Alright, that was about 4.5 hours of embroidery. It did take me a little bit longer to finish these shoes just because I was trying to get the angles to show you guys some of the stitches. But they're all done, they're all ready to box up and ship off. I will be taking some photos of them first and then I'll be getting them ready to ship. As I said before, I do have a downloadable PDF for this design, so if you do want to stitch these for yourself and you're feeling kind of crafty, I'll have that linked in the description below. I really love getting requests for like fall and earthy toned colour schemes because I think they really pop on the white Converse especially, and they're just really beautiful bridal shoes. I'm really happy with how these turned out. So that brings us to the end of today's video. I hope that maybe you learned something, maybe you took something away from the close-ups of the stitches that I showed. I will be posting more tutorial style embroidery videos, and I have a few secret projects that I'm working on behind the scenes, so if you don't want to miss any of that, then I would definitely recommend subscribing to this channel. Leave me a like if you like this video and comment below if you would wear shoes like this or if you would want to try a project like this yourself. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in my next video. Bye!